Hello everybody and welcome back to the My Generation podcast. Before we get into the episode with Kieran and Poole talking about snooker, I just wanted to remind you guys that a lot of the episodes here on the show are pre-recorded, and this episode was recorded back on the 7th of February. So any dates and times that me and Kieran refer to sort of before any isolation or social distancing measures. So that's why some of the stories that we talk about that are quite recent are about events all across the world. I hope wherever you are, you're keeping safe and well at home, and I hope you're all doing well, and please do enjoy this discussion about snooker with Kieran. Thank you for listening. Welcome everyone to the 46th episode of the My Generation podcast, and we'll be talking about a sport that's very close to my heart today. We're talking about snooker. I've been wanting an excuse to talk about this for so long on the podcast, and today I found the perfect guest. We are going to be speaking to podcaster and comedian Kieran Poole, and we're doing our first ever podcast over the world of Skype. Welcome to the show, Kieran.
Hello. Yes, snooker. We get to talk about snooker. It's not enough podcasts talk about snooker. However, though, I don't want other podcasts to talk about snooker because I talk about snooker on a podcast. If more people talk about snooker, it's going to be more competition.
Oh, absolutely.
So I'm not sure if I do want more people to talk about snooker or not.
Yeah, it's sort of got a captive market there. Yeah, not enough people talk about it. I mean, it's something that I don't ever really get to talk about because usually I'm the only one in the room who knows about sort of the sport in a way. And then we got talking about it, and we figured out there's more people out there that listen to snooker. And then you showed me your show, and now I'm realising that there's more to talk about. Could you sort of paint a picture of what you do on your snooker show?
Yes, so I am lucky enough to present the World Snooker Tour, which is kind of like the Premier League of snooker, I guess, equivalent to the Premier League of football. The World Snooker Tour is an official podcast, which means that I get to basically hang out with my heroes, because when I was a kid I wanted to be a professional snooker player. We were recently in Berlin, so last week we were in Berlin for the German Masters, and we did a live show in front of an audience there, and it's basically I sit down with a couple of players and we chat about things off the table. We don't talk about snooker at all, really. We talk about like how many nectar points they've got. I do little challenges on. I've got like a tiny tabletop table which I've had since a kid, so I get them to play on that, and I usually beat them. I beat Sean Murphy, and he had to use a banana. It's very silly. It's the idea of it is that it brings out these players' personalities, and it shows them as humans, because we often forget. I think especially with snooker, because it's such a it's a sport where you don't get to really show all that emotion playing it, as opposed to football and rugby and stuff. So I guess that side of it is kind of brought out to fans via the podcast. But I'm very lucky. I got the gig I'm very lucky to have it.
Yeah, well, like you said, with snooker players, when they're actually playing the sport, you almost have to hide your emotions because you don't want to give away what's going on in your mind to your opponent. It's a constant battle, and then and of course, if a player starts fist pumping or going over celebrating, the people that run the sport may not be the happiest, or fans even as well, because it's a very sort of traditional sport where you wear bow ties and you're very it's a complete gentleman sport, or thankfully now more of a late women's sport as well, because for years it's there's not been enough coverage of the women's game. Obviously it's slowly increasing now, but yeah, it's a sport that's just kind of designed to have a lot of sportsmanship or sportswomanship involved, and I think if you were to have lots of, the best players, like the most popular players ever, are those that did though. So you've got Jimmy White, you've got Alex Higgins, obviously Ronnie, players who are really eccentric and did really, really sort of entertain off the table as well as on it. Yeah, because I think that's sort of an interesting paradox there, really, because you hide it, but Ronnie's personality is massive. He's probably one of those names that everyone sort of knows, whether you sort of know about snooker or not. But I want to sort of focus on, you said you got the gig for doing this quite young. How did you get into the Premier League of snooker and podcasting with all these household names?
Well, it's quite a nice story. So I was a sports journalist student. So in 2013, I applied for work experience, because everyone has to do work experience. So I applied for work experience with World Snooker Tour, and got it. And because I think they contacted my course, I think I was the only one that said, "Yeah, I really want to do it," because everyone was doing football stuff. So yeah, and I did it, and then I did it wasn't a Masters. So Ali Pali 2013, and that was amazing. That was like kid in a candy shop, and I just kept in contact. And then I pitched the idea to them last year, saying I really think there should be a podcast. And yeah, now I present and produce it, and come up with all the ideas, and it's I don't know, it just shows you kind of got to create your own job, I suppose, because I kind of pitched it, and if I hadn't, obviously it wouldn't be happening now. And yeah, obviously had amazing opportunities doing it. Went to Berlin, maybe doing some more live shows as well coming up, and yeah, was at the Masters at Ali Pali this year as well, which is nice because it was 7 years after doing the work experience.
Well, you forged your own job there. Yeah, you've created a completely new position that didn't even exist before that. I mean, when you got that initial work experience, you said you're the only one who jumped up and sort of wanted to show effort into doing this. What actually got you into snooker in the first place?
I used to, as I said, I wanted to be a pro. I thought I could, which is ridiculous because I was never going to. So I used to play when I was like 13. I was got obsessed when I was 14, 15. Had a bit of coaching. Would go to like a coaching thing, and people were like, "Oh, snooker coaching, what's that?" But I used to have like on a Sunday morning or Saturday morning, I can't remember, a club about several miles away. My dad used to take me, and I used to play. I used to play with my dad in like, but snooker rooms used to be really smoky. So before the smoking ban, you'd go into a snooker room and you'd have like 10 tables, and it'd be quite old men, and there'd be like a fog. And I actually quite liked it. So I've never smoked in my life, but I actually quite liked it because you'd come out stinking of smoke, but it was like, oh yeah, I've been to snooker today. And obviously now it's a very different atmosphere, I suppose. So that was when I used to go, and my dad always used to beat me, and then I just loved it. I don't know. I think it's the best sport ever designed. If you could design a sport that's really hard, you'd struggle to beat snooker. I think it's the hardest sport by an absolute mile. Not in terms of endurance, because obviously you do like Ironman and things like that, but I think in terms of if you were to design a sport which you need to completely dedicate yourself to, and you can I think it's the only sport that can make you look rubbish if you don't practice. So like, I'm quite good, but if I don't practice, it looks like I've never played. Whereas if I play football, you don't get that, do you? You don't look like you've never played football if you don't play for a few weeks.
Yeah, I fully understand that. I mean, I totally agree with you that, and as a fan of snooker and as someone sort of in the circle, I think it's really clear how punishing snooker can be, because you can watch absolute two top-level pros go at each other, and if one is even slightly off the ball, it can be a landslide win.
Well, it's millimetres as well, literal millimetres, and you know the craziest thing about snooker is you literally have to sit and watch your opponent play. I mean, that is quite an astonishing thing. The mental side of it is quite astonishing, because in a Crucible 30-odd frames, semi-final and final, like you might sit and watch your opponent play for 30 minutes and you won't have a shot. And again, you wouldn't have that in football. You won't have that in any other sport. In tennis, you hit the ball, the other person hits it back, but you'll always have a shot unless it's an ace. You're involved all the time. But with snooker, you're not. That is the only, and I suppose darts, but you can only throw 3 darts at a time in darts, can't you? So it's a sport where I could play it and not to be involved for a significant long period of time. And yeah, it's an extraordinary sport. It's an extremely frustrating sport. People say the same about golf as well, I think. But if you were to design a sport, I think it's the best designed sport. Not to play, not to watch maybe, but to play it. I mean, to watch is getting, they're doing amazing things to make the game more quicker and things like this. I mean, I love watching snooker, but I understand that some people don't.
Yeah, well, you've got different versions, haven't you, as well? Because I know there's that sort of fast-paced one where there's like a shot clock, and it's a little bit more informal because the crowd are sort of encouraged to get involved in that.
Like darts, yeah, that's kind of like darts, and that's doing really well. But it's like cricket, Test match cricket will always. I love Test match cricket. That will always live, and the longer form of snooker will always live. You'll have shorter versions, you have longer versions. Different fans maybe like different ones, but yeah, I think it's awesome. I could talk about snooker all day.
Yeah, and you've got things like on Facebook pages, like I know the World Snooker Tour, that if there's like a really good shot that's like quite sort of making the rounds with how impressive it was. I remember there was last week that it might have been a couple of weeks ago, that Steve Maguire shot where he fired it at the jaw and then it rolled back in and the white went in, but just that clip was on social media, so you don't have to sit through the full game. You can just go straight there and get the highlights.
And also most people Not necessarily. I mean, most people may not have ever played on a full-size snooker table because it is huge. I think everyone's always shocked when they see a full-size table. But most people have played pool in a pub. So, like, everyone knows, like, if someone does a really good shot in snooker, everyone appreciates it. Everyone knows that that's really good because most people have played pool at some point and know how hard it is to do certain things. So I think, like, that shot that you're talking about, like, even if you've never played snooker before, like, I know nothing about bowls. But do you remember a couple of weeks ago there was a video of a bowls player who did like an amazing bowl, but that looked incredibly difficult and incredibly amazing, and yet I understood that was a really good bowl. So yeah, it's stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's something that can almost even bring in new fans, because you see a shot like that, you see the atmosphere, and you think, well, I want to be a part of that now, and you might just see it because your friend shared it on a timeline.
Well, power of social media, yeah. So obviously you can see sports and sports governing bodies are really looking at it.
And in terms of the more podcasting side and sort of trying to bring new people in, I mean, I wanted to know from you sort of what the most fascinating interview you've had with a big name within the world of snooker, and what made that interview so fascinating.
The first one I think was really interesting because the first one we did was with Sean Murphy and Michael Holt, and it was the first time they'd met me. So, and they were really great and they were really sweet. Now I know Sean a bit better because we've done the live show together and we sort of, see each other at tournaments, I suppose. And I think he's great because he's a really good ambassador for the sport. I think, to be honest, all the players are, like, all of them are, because they absolutely love the game. But I'd say Mark Selby was really interesting because I didn't realise that Mark Selby left school really young, and that's a guy that is at the top of his game. Like, literally, he was world number one for a long time. Like, that's a guy that, has literally reached the pinnacle of his profession, and yet he has a very, very loose education, and he is incredibly what's the word where you speak well? Loquacious.
Like eloquent.
Yeah, like and even if he wasn't, it wouldn't matter. Of course it wouldn't matter. But like I think when I was sitting opposite him, chatting to him, I think I was just sitting quite in awe of Mark Selby. I'll tell you what as well, actually, another one that probably blows Mark Selby out of the water slightly, actually. Sahel Fahady. So he is an Iranian snooker player, and I just did a sit-down interview with him at the UK Championship in York, and this guy was like, he did national service in Iran, and he was talking about his experiences there as a professional snooker player, and just extraordinary. This guy was like, national service is a big thing out there. I believe they do 2 years. Go on, off you go, survive. Like, this is your training. All the while he wants to be playing snooker, so he had to come back from that and carry on practicing, and he had very limited time practicing. So I think he was, and there's only two basically Iranian snooker players on the circuit. So I think I sat in awe of him, but for different reasons than Mark. I think I sat in awe of him because I was like, I wouldn't be out. This guy's tough. And he's like, the whole time he was just saying, yeah, but like snooker, I love snooker, like, and it's a game, like, remember, it's a game. And I thought, yeah, this guy actually has a lot of perspective. Whereas Mark, you've got to respect Mark, because crumbs, I was in education until the age of 21. You're at university still. Can you imagine leaving education? I don't know what age it was, but it might have been like 13 or 14. Can you imagine that? Like, I would have been screwed.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's interesting. I mean, this sport, almost unlike any other, with the interviews, you do get more time, I think, to sit down and have those conversations. And
yeah, the relationship's very different. So I've when I was training to be a sports journalist, like, you interview footballers and stuff like that, and there's always a PR person, there's always a media representative from the club. But with snooker, there's a really good relationship between the media and the players, and I think it's because they understand, like, the whole thing is, listen, we're going to promote your sport, we're going to promote you, and unlike football, kind of, there's a lovely relationship. Like, for instance, like, the media sometimes have lunch with the players, stuff like that, whereas you'd never have that with footballers. And that's not the footballers' fault. That's usually the people that work with them. The footballers usually actually wouldn't mind, happy to talk.
Yeah, I think a sport like football is a little bit more faster moving, though, in a way, isn't it? Because you're constantly on to the next game that's next week, whereas I think the tour is, even though it's starting to actually get quite big and there's lots of different events you can go to, there is still time at those events. It's played at a different pace, and I guess the whole media of the sport takes place at a different pace.
Well, yeah, I had a lovely moment in Berlin. So I was, because obviously, so we're all in a hotel, and the players obviously stay in pretty much the same hotel as the media, just because it's always the nearest one. And I went down to breakfast, and the player called David Grace, who's from Leeds, and he'd been on the podcast in York like a month earlier, and this was at the German Masters. So I just went down and I saw him. I said hello to him. We just got chatting, and then I said to him, "Well, I'm about to explore Berlin after this." And his game was in the evening. He said, "So am I." So basically, we went around together, and we went around and looked around Berlin and looked at the Holocaust Memorial, looked at Checkpoint Charlie, all these poignant things, I should say, in Berlin, and all these really important things to see and learn about. And I was like, "Oh God, I'm just walking around with a professional snooker player here, having a lovely time." And he's really nice, and it's like that. I'm not sure that would happen in football, where I can just say, "Oh, do you want to go out and we could have a wander?" So that was really sweet. That was actually really nice, especially as well because my geography is awful. I think if he didn't do that, I would have ended up back in France.
Yeah, you needed like a chaperone around there with you. Luckily, the people playing the sport that you're with, yeah, they're able to come along and help you out.
It's sure enough, they travel so much. It's unbelievable. Like he was saying, because he lost his first round match. So like he lost and then had to travel to another country for another tournament. That's quite impressive as well. And of course they have to pay for their own travel. So you got to think about the tournaments you enter. You've got to, if you've got kids and stuff, and you've got to put bread on the table and stuff. You've got to consider, right? Okay, can I? Obviously like it's a bit different if you're in the top 10 or whatever. But if you're number 65 or something, there's a lot you don't realise that you've got. Yeah, it's a lot of travel, and it's travelling on your own, and you haven't got like in football they take private jets, don't they? And they've got all the media people with them. Snooker players don't. They go on their own. It's all off their own back. And the amount of times they lose their cue, these long cases in airports, get lost, or they forget their passport, or they forget their cue. Yeah, that happens a lot, and it always makes me laugh. But it's not funny really, because you haven't got your cue. You're a bit screwed.
Yeah, well, no, that's eye-opening to me. I didn't know that's how it was, because when you see them on the TV.
I always assumed they just went round together and it was all paid for, like in football. But no, like it'd be madness. Like who would pay for it if you think about it? Because there's hundreds of players. You can't do that. They travel to China. The China Open's just been sadly cancelled because of the terribly sad issues there with the corona disease. But they travel to China a lot. They travel to Thailand. They travel to all over the world. If me and you were to do that off our own back, we'd quickly become bankrupt. So you've got to think about like the financial elements, and that's why the prize money's so high. That's why it is so high, because you've got to have incentives. You might have one day where you get to wander around, but you're basically back in travelling, sitting in hotels. It's like when bands tour the world. I've never been in a rock band, and I don't think it's as cool as it probably looks, because they just spend their whole time in hotel rooms. You have to. So I don't know. I can't imagine it's actually as good. What I find funny as well, of course, is if you book a 2-week stay. So say you're playing at the World Championship in Sheffield. Of course, if you get knocked out the first day, you've paid for 2 weeks in that hotel. So you've got to also work out how long you think you're going to be in the tournament for, and you can't get a refund. That's how hotels work. So you've got to consider as well, right, am I going to have to pay for a day every time? Most hotels don't like that. So it's all these sorts of things that I never realised until I've been doing this podcast and spending time with the players. Actually, you never think that, do you? Whereas with you'd never need that for a footballer. But like when England play at the World Cup, they obviously book the training ground and the hotels and facilities for the whole time in case England reach the World Cup final. And they wouldn't just book it for a week, would they? But players have to all the time, and they have to obviously spend that on their own money. And then obviously, so they go out, they've then got to sort out some sort of refund, I guess. I don't know, but
I think that adds a little bit more now that, because I'm just sort of a passive. I watch snooker. I don't have any involvement in the sport, so when I'm now watching snooker, sort of thinking about those tournaments, I'll be thinking about those logistics. I think it just, for me now, hearing what you just said, it adds another layer of tension to the game, especially if you've got, say, two English players who've travelled to like Germany.
Next time you miss that black ball or something like that, it's not just a game that's being, it's livelihoods here. Not to make it really serious, because ultimately it's a game, and it's not the most, I think every snooker player would be, God, so thankful that, they get to do their thing they love. So it's sort of, I'm painting quite a dark picture here, where it's not at all. It's actually, you never hear snooker players complain. They won't complain because they know that they're doing the thing they love. They're very, they're very humble.
Yeah, and for you, sort of growing up, really, you've cited some names of some really like big characters. So you got like Ronnie, Alex Higgins. Who's been your inspiration for snooker growing up? You said you wanted to be a pro. Who was the player you were looking at that made you feel that way?
To be honest, I didn't really have one. I think I just watched it all. I didn't. No, I don't know really. I couldn't name you a single player. I don't think there's ones I liked, but no, there's not really a player that I used to think, oh, I want to be like him. Whereas you usually do, don't you? That's probably why I didn't become professional, because I didn't look at anyone.
But yeah, I think it's also because everyone's got like really different styles. But I don't know, within snooker, I feel like it's different relationship you have than with football, where with football you kind of stick with one team, but with snooker you can love lots of different players for the different type of skill they have, and there's not really one reason to sort of just stick with one player unless they're like from your area or from like in your friendship circle or something.
Yes, very much like tennis at Wimbledon as well, isn't it? You just pick, you just want to watch, don't you? Like you just want to, I don't know, you might say I want them to win or the other player to win. I mean, I think I had some favourites. I can't really remember, to be honest. I just used to watch it all the time. I used to have like a VHS tape. I'd record snooker on the telly and then watch it all over again. It's obviously the same shots, and it wouldn't be like finals. And I don't know why, but I would just do that constantly and just watch it all over again. And I'd know the commentary, I'd know everything.
Yeah, commentary is such a massive part of snooker, isn't it? It's just the passion.
Yeah, what I like is when you've got you always get the laugh in the crowd, and obviously the players know what they've laughed at, and it's always delayed, and that always makes me giggle.
Yeah, because I think with the commentary of snooker as well, there again you sort of have a more playful relationship between the commentator and the audience, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, there's some real characters. John Parrott is probably the funniest man. He's the best story. He's the best. He does a lot of after dinner speaking. His storytelling is better than any comedian I've done stand up. John Virgo is such a brilliant MC, and Dennis. They all are. Ken Doherty. My lord, that man's funny. So like they're all brilliant. Them commentators, and they're all. Yeah, you want to you spend time with them. You hear some stories, and really funny guys. It's quite hard to commentate at snooker. I'm not sure I could do it. I'm not sure how I could bring it to life.
You see, commentary was one of the things within snooker that absolutely fascinated me, that I quite love, just because of when I think back to my favourite moments within the sport, I can always hear the commentary. So I don't know if you remember the Martin Gould, when he had that like legendary clearance about 2 or 3 years ago, where he just cleared the whole table and it looked like nothing would pot. It was in like a world championship, I think, and I think he went on to lose the game in the end, but like just that clearance was one of my absolute favourite moments.
I liked, I think it was Dennis Taylor when Ronnie got a 147. I think it was 2008 at the Crucible. He was like, Ronnie's a genius. The man is a genius. That was like, whoa. It's like, remember the name Wayne Rooney, I suppose. John. I mean, when John Virgo where's the cue ball going? That sort of like.
Yeah.
You see people wear T-shirts with that on around the arenas now, they are blooming funny men. And in the latest podcast of Table Talk, which is what it's called, the World Snooker one, we with Ken Doherty, we talked about like what if they try and make each other laugh during the commentary, and he was telling stories of they always try and make each other laugh just before they go on air and stuff like this, and they just it's lovely, it's brilliant to hear that.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to be going back to Kieran in just a moment to continue this really great chat about snooker. I've been wanting to talk about this for so long, but just wanted to let you all know who's listening to the show. We are now on SoundCloud, so if you're listening to us on YouTube, you can follow us through SoundCloud now. And we're going to be moving on to our local Kent music enthusiast. It's Sammy Bacon. Every single week on the My Generation podcast, Sammy brings us a quick-fire, minute to 2 minute album recommendation to get your teeth into. And here is the album that Sammy recommends this week.
What's going on, everybody? Hope you're doing well. Hope you're enjoying the podcast. This week, my recommendation is Primary Colours by The Horrors. The The Horrors are a shoegaze goth rock band from the UK, and Primary Colours is their second studio album and probably their best. Notably, Primary Colours was produced by Jeff Barrow of Portishead and Beak. What makes the Horrors stand out, and particularly Primary Colours in particular, is their very creative approach to their use of synthesizers and guitar work. Guitarist Josh Hayward is one of the most innovative guitarists around. I think if you listen to the Horrors without knowing anything about them, you struggle to guess that there is a guitar involved. Josh Hayward has said in an interview that for most of his life he's very disinterested in sort of guitar-based music and mostly like dance stuff until he listened to Sonic Youth, and I think that sort of abrasive avant-garde approach that Sonic Youth had to their guitar work really shows up in Josh's work. Josh's guitar tones are murky and thick and rich and flow in and out of each other, and he is really he is what gives God, I can't speak today. He is what gives the Horrors this creative edge they have. The opener, Mirror's Image, is a great opener. It builds slowly with this very warm synth and this very simple bass drum rhythm before the whole band kick in, and Josh Hayward's guitar screams in. It's just a great guitar. Who Can Say is another great song. It's just this great pop song, and that's something the Horrors do really well, crafting very good pop songs with this weird sort of tinge. Who Can Say just bangs. And Sea Within a Sea is just this 8-minute epic of a closer, which just builds and builds and builds, and then its outro, but it's just cascading synthesizer line is great. I Only Think of You is a nice sort of variation in the track. Listening all the tracks on this album are about 4 minutes long-ish and a fairly, sort of rocky and headbanging, get you going. And then I Only Think of You is this slow, meandering tune with Josh Shear's guitar and Tom Fuse's synthesizer voice just mixing and swirling around each other. Most of the other Horrors discography I'm not too keen on, but Primary Colours is an absolutely exceptional album. If you like shoegaze and if you like rock with a experimental sort of avant-garde angle, I really check out Primary Colours. Back to old Max. See you soon.
And thank you for that, Sammy. We'll be tuning back in with Sammy to find out what album he recommends for you all next week here on the My Generation podcast. Now, moving on to our music feature. Every week we feature a song or two on the My Generation podcast now. It's been so great having so many local Kent music enthusiasts and just so many great artists on the show over the past couple of weeks. I hope you've all been enjoying the sounds. So this week we've got one song from Gareth Bland. Music's always been a big part of his life. He played the drums in his teenage years and in his mid-30s had some more time, so finally learnt the guitar. And after picking up some chords and writing and being inspired by bands like the Beatles, the Jam, Oasis and the Stone Roses, finally he has released his first song, and it's called Touch the Sky by Gareth Bland, here on the My Generation podcast.
As soon as I wake up in the morning, as soon as I open my eyes, the rest of the world is still yawning. I just wanna learn to fly. How high will we fly? How high will we fly? And soon we will touch the sky. And soon it'll be just you and I. Forever, forever. open our eyes. The rest of the world is so boring. We just wanna fly so high.
Great song to feature today. It's been great to feature Gareth. We'll be playing that song once more again later on in the show. But now we're going to be moving back to Kieran and continuing our discussion on snooker. So I wanted to ask you, Kieran, about so you said you were with Sean Murphy for that the video you did in the podcast, and you said you made him play it with a banana. I saw that video up on the Facebook page. Really, really funny. You're the ideas man behind that, I assume?
Yeah. So we so that's the reason we did that. So when I was about 14, and I used to play on that little table. So this is a table about 3 foot by 1.5 foot, whereas a proper table is 12 foot by 6 foot. I used to play on that, and I wrote to the World Snooker Tour, and I wrote to them saying, I play on this little table. I really want to be a professional snooker player. Is it possible to be a professional snooker player on a tiny table? And they wrote me a letter. And unfortunately, I can't find that letter, because the whole point of we did that for the first podcast is I was basically going to read the letter and say, like, get Sean and Michael Holt to react to it. But we sort of did it without the letter, and we talked about that. So I thought, well, if I could play an ex-world champion on my table, that's pretty cool. And obviously Sean has won the world championship. He's an ex-world champion. So like now I've played world champions on my little small table. So I had a cue, 90 centimetre cue.
Oh, amazing.
And he's got a little banana that we bought in the arena, and he chalked it, and it was good. We used that, and then I played Barry Hawkins. Barry Hawkins used a coat hanger. I played David Grace. He played with the coat hanger. Then I played a couple of the Brendan Moore, the referee. Jan Verhaas refereed our little game. So yeah, so like just random things, and that was the idea, and just sort of seeing. Basically, I just kept winning, and I took it far too seriously.
Yeah, well, you've beaten them, so no one can ever take that away from you. And relating to Table Talk, the show, how frequently does this show come out?
So it's fortnightly at the moment, and so on we are doing fortnightly, and there'll be some live shows to listen to, some bonus interviews as well. So you just got to search Table Talk or Snooker Table Talk on iTunes, Spotify.
Yeah, you can find that everywhere. Well, that's what Kieran and I have to say so far about snooker. But do you have a story to tell about this subject? If so, feel free to leave us a comment here on YouTube, or you can contact the Facebook page at the My Generation Podcast. We'd love to keep this conversation going. We'd love to meet some more snooker fans in the comments below. It's something that me and Kieran could talk about for a lifetime. It's such a brutal sport. I personally, I can't play snooker. I'm a massive...
What's your biggest break?
No, literally, I've played it a handful of times. I've probably like 20 maximum. It's not good. Well, where are you at? What's your maximum?
Like, no, in practice, I've got 50s before. But that's in practice. It's pointless. In a match, you never get that. So I Yeah, it's so like I'd take 20. In match situations, it's very difficult.
Yeah, well, I'm sort of talking as two amateurs sort of playing on a table, not knowing too much of what they're doing. But yeah, I mean, I've been involved in sort of that pool league atmosphere because I used to play in the Maidstone pool league for a couple of years when I was a bit younger. Have you had experience sort of playing pool on that kind of level?
No, I've so obviously I should be good at it because it's my surname. But no, I really want to. Like, I usually, this is going to sound dreadfully arrogant, but when I play pool with my friends, I always win. In pubs or whatever, I rarely lose. But I think if I played someone who plays in a league, I probably would lose because I suspect if you're, I'm just good because I know pool, but I don't know. I reckon I'd lose if I played someone that properly plays it, because I just play here and there in a pub or so. But I think if I practiced, I'd be pretty decent. For a proper league, like, you have to hit the ball on the cushions and everything every shot, so it's actually really...
Yeah, they work. I mean, I played with the rules where you either had to pot a ball or it had to come off a cushion, so that it sort of avoided... It sped the game up because it meant people couldn't tuck up.
Like, that's proper pool, so I'm not sure how well I'd fare at that. I think I'd be found out if I played that.
Yeah, but I think that's your transition's almost the easier one to make, sort of going from snooker down to pool, whereas...
Oh, pool to snooker, don't do that. You'll know it's, yeah, snooker to pool. Never play pool and then play snooker on the same day.
But the other way round, I mean, after I played snooker, I mean, I played snooker for the very first time, and then when I moved back to the pool table, I was suddenly, even though I'd just played terrible on a snooker table, I was suddenly a better pool player because the table felt tiny.
Yes, it will, yes. And you'll feel like, oh, I'm like a Greek god. But then next day you'll be rubbish.
Yeah, I think pool's a little bit less punishing than snooker as well, because there's a little bit of luck that can come into it with sort of breaks. But I think that's why pool, you sort of, like snooker, you play it over a little bit of time. It's not like one game and that's it. Which I think that endurance side of snooker is really intense, isn't it? With especially at the World Championships where it's like best of 35 frames and you play it over like 3 days.
Oh wow, yeah, absolutely. And that's a lot of mental strength involved in that. That's quite an extraordinary sporting conquest, playing one of their matches.
Yeah, and I mean that is for me where snooker really becomes a sport to me, because that endurance of being able to play a sport for 3 days, 8, 9, 10 hours a day, where you have to be focused all the time or it's over. That's just something special.
Yeah, and you might spend hours of that not playing.
Yeah, that must be so hard as well. Not being able to do anything, powerless. It's like if your break's a bad shot, that could be it.
Yeah, could easily.
Wow, well, I'm just going to sort of look ahead onto the podcast as we sort of bring this episode of the show to a close. I'm just going to tease a few more topics we've got coming up on the podcast in the future coming weeks. So we've got Joe Finnegan. He's a returning podcast guest. We're talking about passion projects. Joe started up a little game design sort of passion project on his own, built 2 really cool games, and we're going to be talking about what that journey was like for him. We've got Connor Jenkins, interestingly, another returning guest. He's talking about modelling. Connor is a full-time model and will be giving insight into how, whilst he's still at university, he's been able to turn modelling into his career. And we've got a new podcast guest, Emily Cook. She's coming on. Emily Cook works within Doctor Who magazine work, and she's going to be talking about what it's like with life fully embedded in Doctor Who. That's going to be such a cool episode. Looking forward to bringing all of those every single Thursday at 6, as well as new artists and Sammy's music recommendations. And don't forget that every Sunday evening on the My Generation podcast, coming up very soon in the future, I'll be doing solo episodes as well. 20-minute long chats, anecdotes, movie reviews, and more. So stay tuned for that in the next few months. Now, we'll go back to Kieran in just a moment to wrap up this week's episode of the My Generation podcast. But there are future topics that we're still looking for people to talk about. I'd love to talk to a painter on the show, someone who has skills when it comes to artistry. What do you draw? Why do you do it? Is it work or a hobby? We want to speak to you on the show. If that person is you, and you're between the ages of 18 and 35, and you live in the area of Kent, you can get in touch with the Facebook page at the My Generation podcast. I'll also be posting questions and featuring answers in future episodes of the show. Again, all links are in the description. Now, I just wanted to, as we're concluding the show, Kieran, just ask you what you think you've learned by talking about snooker on today's episode of the podcast.
Nice to talk to other young chaps and chapesses about snooker. So, yeah, I think that.
Yeah, and if you're newly just getting into the sport, please do get in touch with us because it's still a massively growing sport, isn't it?
Yes, and I suggest that maybe for one of your episodes in the future, you challenge me with on a table, and I have to. No, I won't use a banana. But we'll have a game. We could have a. Maybe.
Yes, I mean we're always looking to do new things on the show. I mean,
while the chap that's the modeller does modelling, walking around the table, the painter paints us playing the game. And if someone is an actor that you've had on the podcast, maybe they could be acting out interpretive dance to the shop.
I think that sounds like a beautiful episode. We'll have to organise it. Well, we are looking to sort of go for some new crazy episodes because Connor, who's coming on about modelling, interestingly, we've already got it lined up to come way in the future, but we're doing a Dungeons and Dragons episode because even though he does modelling, he's also a keen DM for Dungeons and Dragons, and so
he could be referee / DM of the snooker game, but there could be like challenges amid the snooker game where balls go into pockets but they get thrown back out because they're rejected by dragons in caves. I literally have never played Dungeons and Dragons, but I assume.
Yeah, I assume so. I mean, I haven't either. That's why he's coming on the show to show me. But I only bring it up because we're going to be playing that. Yeah, well, we're going to be playing that live on the podcast. And so now we can do one at a snooker or pool table. We'll have to maybe see if it's pool. I may have over-egged it with my 20 break of snooker. I mean, I think I may have got that like once and celebrated like a madman. But beyond that, we're not looking for any better. It's been a couple years since I've actually been at the snooker table as well. That's why I prefer to talk about it and observe rather than play. And I think you could attest to that.
Yeah, oh yes, no, that's why I do a podcast about it.
Oh, absolutely. Well, we're going to be closing this week's episode once again with Gareth Bland, the musician that we had on earlier in the show. Just to remind you, he only picked up the guitar at 35. He's 38 now. He's only been playing for a couple of years, but he's been heavily inspired by the Beatles, the Jam, Oasis, and the Stone Roses, and he's brought out his first song, Touch the Sky, and we'll be closing with that in the moment. Really great stuff. We'll definitely have Kieran back on the show again, and maybe at the snooker table as well. That'd be so much fun. And closing off this week's episode of the My Generation podcast, it's Gareth Bland with Touch the Sky. We'll tune in with you next week for the next episode of the My Generation podcast.
As soon as I wake up in the morning, as soon as I open my eyes, the rest of the world is still yawning. I just wanna learn to fly. How high will we fly? How high will we fly? And soon we will touch the sky. Soon it'll be just you and I, forever, forever. As soon as we wake up in the morning, as we open our eyes, the rest of the world is so boring. We just wanna fly so